Welcome to Overlooked, a podcast by TunukaMedia. My name is Yemi, and I'll be your host for the show. In this podcast, I introduce you to potentially overlooked news stories from around the world. This will include the good, the bad, and sometimes the absolutely hilarious. To keep you informed, I pick up stories that may have been missed by your home news network. The Overlooked podcast is produced every week and covers news articles from the previous week. Come back often, share with your friends, and feel free to add the podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. My goal is to make sure you have a pleasant and engaging listening experience every single time you tune in. So drop me a note on Twitter or Facebook. Just search for TunukaMedia. That is TunukaMedia. Episodes are also hosted on YouTube on the TunukaMedia YouTube channel. Again, that is TunukaMedia. Links to the stories will also be posted in the show notes. Finally, if you come across stories or articles that you think should be featured here, please share them and let us all keep informed. Now, let's get to this week's episode. Our first story comes by way of France 24, and it takes place in Iraq/France. 3 kidnapped French nationals and an Iraqi who were freed from captivity, reported March 26, 2020. So the story goes that 3 French nationals and an Iraqi who worked for a French non-governmental organization had been freed and released in Iraq more than 2 months after they went missing. The office of French President Emmanuel Macron welcomed the release of the 3 nationals. I'm going to butcher these names, I'm really sorry. Antoine Brocon, Julien Dittmar, Alexandre Godarzi, and an Iraqi Tariq Matoka. The office said in a statement, which indicated that the 4 had been kidnapped. The 4 men all had worked for SOS Chrétiens d'Orient, an NGO which states on its website that it seeks to help Christians in the region. The 4 had disappeared in Baghdad on January 20th. Our next story comes by way of The Guardian and is reported from Japan. The headline goes that Japan Airlines ditches compulsory high heels and skirts in a big one for the hashtag Kuto movement. That is Kutoo movement. So the story goes that female flight attendants working in Japan Airlines will no longer be required to wear high heels or skirts, and the airline has said in a rare victory for Japan's hashtag Kuto campaign against workplace dress codes for women. The airline is the first major Japanese company to relax its regulations in response to complaints from women that having to wear high heels was uncomfortable and often left them in considerable pain. Japan Airlines JAL said that under the new dress code, which will take effect next month, almost 6,000 female crew members will be able to choose footwear that best fits their needs and swap their skirts for trousers, adding that the move was intended to create a, in quote, diverse working environment. Oh, that's pretty cool. So this next story is reported through the Los Angeles Times, and it's from Beer, Somalia. Yes, BEER, Somalia. This is... Okay, I'm just gonna read it and you guys tell me what you think. Locusts swarm East Africa, laying waste to crops and livelihoods. It was reported March 26th. The desert locust, better known as, and I'm going to butcher this, okay, I'm not gonna even try. I'm just gonna spell it. SCHISTOCERCAGREGARIA. That's the desert locust, has smitten Eastern Africa like a plague from the Bible. Hundreds of them have conquered territory in at least 8 countries, overwhelming governments and aid organizations while consuming crops and grazing land so rapidly that experts fear widespread famine. Scientists blame a pair of 2018 cyclones in the Indian Ocean, a region they say is likely to experience more such storms as global temperatures rise. The cyclones dumped unusually large amounts of rain on the locust's main breeding ground, a swath of the Arabian Peninsula known as the Empty Quarter. That's in quotes. That led to optimal breeding conditions. Locusts lay egg in the sand, and when that sand is moist, the egg can hatch in as little as 2 weeks, and the larva can mature in as little as 2 more weeks to stop reproducing again. In just 9 months and 3 rounds of breeding, so this is 9 months and 3 rounds of breeding, the population exploded by a factor of 8,000. From the empty quarter, which encompasses parts of Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, that's United Arab Emirates, and Yemen, the swarms crossed the Red Sea to the coast of Somalia in the summer of 2019 and laid more eggs there before carving a path of destruction west and south deeper into Africa. The storms of 2018 also reached Somalia, ending several years of droughts. But by January, the locust swarms had damaged 100% of Somalia's staple crops of maize and sorghum, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. In neighboring Kenya, up to 30% of pasture land has been lost. Further west, locusts have gorged on crops in southern Sudan, already reeling from years of civil war and widespread hunger. They have laid new eggs in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Uganda. The UN is trying to assess the damage in many more places. Our next story comes to us via All Africa and focuses on Kenya. The headline is that dozens are injured as police brutality marks the start of curfew. Reported 27 March 2020. Police brutality ushered in the coronavirus curfew for Coast and Eldoret residents as cops descended on hapless citizens 2 hours before the deadline. The officers, who were armed with batons, beat the commuters after they crowded and tried to force themselves towards the Likoni Channel. The commuters complained that they were getting late as the curfew time was approaching. The officers hurled tear gas canisters at the crowd as they mercilessly beat up the people, seriously injuring most of them. Women who were caught in the melee were left with tears after they were beaten and frog-marched by the irate officers. A stampede occurred as hundreds of the pedestrians were forced back to the line that has stretched past the PCEA church and meandered within Kizingo streets. During the better part of the day, police had been forcing commuters to line up to allow them to maintain the 1.5 meter social distance once they get onto the ferries. The measure has been announced by the government in its effort to deal with the spread of the coronavirus. I'm going to throw in a couple of honorable mentions. So these didn't occur within the week of March 27th, but I thought they were cool, or I thought that they were important enough that I wanted to bring them in and just mention them as we move forward. So the first story comes out of Iran, reported by RE News. Kind of an uplifting story because it says a 103-year-old woman from Iran has recovered after being infected with the new coronavirus. State media reported, despite overwhelming evidence that the elderly are more at risk from the disease. The woman is the second elderly patient in Iran to have survived the disease. The other was a 91-year-old man from Kerman in southeast of Iran, according to IRNA. The second honorable mention goes to Japan and is reported by Meinichi. From Kofu, a junior high school girl has handcrafted 612 masks from materials bought with some 80,000 yen of her own savings to help out the elderly, orphans, and others facing shortages due to the spread of the new coronavirus. This is really heartwarming. Thanks for listening. As a reminder, the podcast will be released every week. Also, don't forget to follow TunukaMedia on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Connect to say hi, or even share your stories that are happening in your local area or region. Nothing is too big or small. Thanks again, and now for the bloopers. My name is Yemi and it is blah 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 blah. Reach out on Twitter or Facebook. Just search for TunukaMedia. Thanks for listening. As a blah 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 blah. Our next story comes to us by way of The Guardian and is reported from Japan. So it says Japan Airlines